Greetings and welcome. You are watching SEM Mondays. Welcome to another nugget of source energy medicine wisdom video. And in today's video, we are going to talk about, while Dr. Emoto's photos are indeed beautiful, they do not fit the scientific model. I'm often asked, do I have credible scientific analysis of source energy medicine? I'm very grateful to Dr. Emoto and for his groundbreaking work. In the early days of source energy medicine, I would have had a really hard time being able to explain how it is we're able to take water and do anything to it, let alone take water and turn it into an energy medicine. I mentioned briefly one of my frustrations is that Dr. Emoto's work does not fit the scientific model, and for years I was looking for a credibly scientific way of being able to analyze our source energy medicines to be able to distinguish the difference between each source energy medicine and clearly show a graphic difference between a control substance and a sample of that control that was then turned into a source energy medicine. Certainly seeing Dr. Emoto's photographs was confirming validation that yes, our water is in balance, it is happy water, it is harmonious. The center molecules are structured in a hexagonally shaped molecule, and yet my quest for finding a credibly scientific approach to being able to analyze source energy medicine continued for a few more years until I came upon what is known as a Raman spectrometer. And Raman spectrometer or Raman spectroscopy is used in material science labs, and it's primarily used to identify substances. It's used in a lot of crime labs to analyze unidentified substances. Raman is essentially a laser-like instrument that has a specific bandwidth, and that specific bandwidth is related to the type of material that's going to be analyzed. One day I was listening to an interview with Lynn McTaggart and Dr. Rustam Roy, who is deceased now. He was a professor at Penn State University for a number of years. And the last several years of his life, he used Raman spectroscopy to analyze water. And his theory or his thesis was that water could hold up to 50,000 different possible combinations of having the hydrogen and oxygen molecules clustered, structured, arranged differently, and of course vibrate differently as well. In that same interview, Dr. Roy stated that the future of all medicine will be in water. As soon as we're able to figure out how to cluster, structure, and arrange water molecules at specific vibrations that would be able to transform disease. Of course, Dr. Roy at the time did not know about source energy medicine, and I'm sad to not have had the opportunity to be able to collaborate with Dr. Roy before his death. Dr. Roy also described water as being like a tape recorder. He described it as being intelligent and impressionable. So immediately following the interview, I went on a quest to find a material science lab that had a Raman spectrometer that would be willing to analyze source energy medicines for us, and it was quite a daunting task. I finally found a lab up in Laramie, Wyoming. I sent the same 7 source energy medicines, different bottles, but the same specific source energy medicines that we sent to Dr. Emoto's lab in Tokyo up to a lab in Laramie, Wyoming to be analyzed with Raman spectroscopy. As I mentioned, Raman is a laser-like instrument that basically bounces light off of the molecules that are in a substance. That information is then gathered in a database, and it would plot out a characteristic curve. You could then use that information to identify an unidentified substance, for example. One of the reasons why I was having difficulty finding a lab that was willing to analyze the water was they said that I was wasting my money and their time, in that they said any sample of water, unless it was from a grossly different source, would all come back with the same exact characteristic curve. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to screen capture so you can see this graphically and visually, and I'll continue to explain Raman and the process that we went through to analyze source energy medicines utilizing Raman, and we'll continue this conversation in a second. What we're about to explore is the Raman analysis of 7 samples of source energy medicine that we submitted to the Delta Nu facility in Laramie, Wyoming. So when the analysis is performed, each sample is given a number and a color so that it can be easily identified on the characteristic curve. So this slide illustrates the 7 source energy medicines that we had analyzed with Raman spectroscopy. Sample number 1 is a control sample. I think it's important to point out that each of the samples, each of the bottles of spring water that we used for this analysis, all came from the same case of spring water, and each bottle had the same production date and same production code to try and keep the variables as restricted as possible. Sample number 1 is our control sample. It is simply the pure spring water with no source energy medicine technology, no source graphic, no source energy medicine charging label, so that we would have a control sample, or a sample that would simply establish a starting point for what the spring water looks like in its pure state. Once each of the samples are numbered and color-coded, then the analysis begins, and that information is then put into a database, and the database then plots out the characteristic curve. Now you'll see the bending mode that I spoke of earlier, and then the symmetric and asymmetric stretching modes. So this slide illustrates the entire spectrum of the characteristic curve of the water of the samples, from the beginning to the end. And the 2 points of the curve that are of most interest are the 2 points that are highlighted: the bending mode aspect and then the symmetrical asymmetrical stretching modes. If you remember, I said earlier that all of the labs that we spoke to said we were wasting our money and their time because each of the samples would be essentially one on top of the other. You'll see that that's not so. This slide is highlighting the symmetrical and asymmetrical section of this overall characteristic curve. And you can clearly see that each of the 7 samples is slightly different. It is unique in its own way. And here is the bending mode segment of the overall characteristic curve, and this one is even more graphic in that you can see that each of the 7 samples is almost as if they were from grossly different sources of water. Now, yes, the database is saying that they're all water, which I think is a good thing, but what it is showing is that the hydrogen and oxygen molecules in each of these 7 samples are clustered, structured, arranged, and vibrate differently. Since this initial test, we have not yet had the opportunity to test all 180. We actually have more than 180 different source energy medicines. I'm curious to find out whether Raman spectroscopy is sensitive enough to be able to distinguish the clustering, structuring, and arrangement and the different vibrations in each of our different source energy medicines. I hope to someday have the opportunity to be able to do that. We have done some further experiments with Raman, and everything has been very inspiring and very exciting, and I look forward to having the opportunity to continue this process and to continue to have scientifically credible means of validating that we're able to take water, structure the molecules, and then charge them with specific vibrations. So I hope you enjoyed today's SEM Mondays Nugget video. I hope you enjoyed the exploration of Raman spectroscopy. I know those are big words and we got a little bit technically complicated, but to me this is super, super, super exciting. Before you run, please scroll down, leave a comment, and let me know one thing that you learned, or please share a highlight or a takeaway. Just in case you don't know about the Source Energy Medicine Quick Start Guide Total Access page, it is an awesome free mini course in Source Energy Medicine, and it contains everything that is essential to your entire journey with Source Energy Medicine. I'll include a link below this video so you can sign up and access the free mini course straight away.